Where I am, yes, it's 7:30. That's right.
It's hot.
It's hot here. It's 85. Not too bad.
Oh,
Who's that? Olivia.
yeah.
Hi, Olivia. You brushing your teeth?
She's got nail polish.
Oh, we don't want that on your face. No.
All right, Mom, stand behind Joel so you're in the middle. That way we could see you better. There you go. There, who's that?
Jenny.
Yeah.
Are
Are you pretending to brush your teeth?
Yeah.
All right, so whenever you're ready, I started recording and we could pick up where we left off with the Shapiros.
Okay, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
I want to refer back to the photo of 1936, which was my great-grandmother's 70th birthday, supposedly.
Oh, no, not that. We can't play with this. Too noisy. Okay.
And
Don't touch.
I hope that many of my cousins have found their copy of it, or if not, they should get one. I'm sure that
Stop it.
Stephen or Jonathan Shapiro have one. I have one somewhere, but a lot of good that would do, because they could forward it or photograph it.
Okay.
Can I talk?
And
Oh, no.
I touched upon in that photo, besides the immediate family, my great grandmother's nephew and nieces were there, which is probably the only time we've ever had a photo of them. So I want to go back and tell everybody, if they didn't know, Bubba, who was what we called her, she had 3 half brothers. And the first half brother, I don't remember his name, he had twin sons named Herman and Albert. Herman lived in Hartford and Albert lived in South Norwalk. And Albert had a son whom they hoped they could make a shidduch with Jean Ann. If you don't know what a shidduch means, that means make a marriage between them. Once again, going back to the theory or the practice that many people had to find their mates through arrangements and family connections. That obviously didn't work out, but and Jean Ann married Stuart in 1950. By the way, the anniversary was last Thursday, the 6th, which was also the anniversary of Hiroshima, which everybody has probably read about. Now, for Hiroshima, that was the 75th anniversary, August 6, 1945. And Jean Ann and Stuart were married on August 6, 1950. So they would have been married 70 years this year. And that, of course, that wedding has gone down in the annals of our history because not only was it a happy occasion, but a terribly sad one, because my grandmother's sister from Cleveland, Becky Cronenberg, died the morning of that wedding in my grandmother's house. So it was a very upsetting time. And my grandmother wasn't sure she should even go on with the wedding, which was scheduled for noon or 1 o'clock. And Becky had died she was discovered at around 9:30. She was only 66 years old, but she had a heart condition.
She died in the house that they were having the wedding?
The wedding was the same day. It was to be the same day.
But a different
She died
location.
in the morning. The wedding was in the afternoon.
She died in the house?
She died in the house. But the wedding was not at the house.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
That's also very complicated. So my grandmother didn't know what the right thing to do was. So she called the rabbi, who happened to be Stuart's uncle, Morris Silverman. He was the head of the Hartford synagogue. a man, he was very well known in rabbinical circles. And he encouraged my grandmother to go on. He said, in Jewish life, whatever death, life goes on. So they went on with the wedding. And, I remember, because I was part of it, as people arrived in their cars, Frank Goodman, Stell's husband, and we went out to the cars to tell people that Becky had died so that they knew how to deal with my grandmother, how to confront her. She was, crying, through most of it. But somehow, and then Becky's son, Leonard Cronenberg, he flew to Middletown that afternoon, to be witness to his mother's death. So the wedding went off, as I said. That was also, talking about Shidduch, Eddie Millen, Virginia's husband, he made the Shidduch between Stuart and Jean Ann because Stuart's father owned a shoe store. And Eddie, of course, had a shoe company. So there was another occasion where there was a marriage broker. And it was Eddie's birthday that day as well. And my grandmother, she was known as a matchmaker. And she returned the favor 5 years later after Stuart's mother had died. She made a shidduch between Stuart's father, Bert Osborne, and an extended member of the Flashman extended family. I won't go into the exact relationship, but that's, my sister's questioning who. It was Lena Kaplan's Mahatenista. And if you don't know what a Mahatenista is, that is your in-law's mother. That is your son-in-law or your daughter-in-law's mother. It's interesting, as Alana has proved to me, Yiddish has exact words for things. In English, to explain that relationship, we need several words. My son-in-law's mother, my daughter-in-law's mother, and they had one for the mother, which is the Mahatenista, and one for the father is the Mahutin. So that's the story there. Back to that photo in 1936. I spoke to you about the first brother had two sons. The second brother, half brother, had a large family, and his wife was Mayashi, your favorite name. Mayashi was a first cousin to Bubba, and she became her sister-in-law. And they went to California in the 30s. And the only one who stayed behind was Ben Salvin, who was in this. I don't think he's in the photo because someone told me he actually took the photo. But his wife, Irene, and his daughter, Bunny, are in the photo. Bunny is sitting right next to my great-grandmother. And his sister, Rose Salvin, is also in the photo. And she lived, when my parents came out to California in the 50s, it might have been even earlier, my mother looked her up. And I guess some reason came up while they were having their visit. And Rose said to my mother, well, you're no longer in Middletown, which is supposed to be a put down. In other words, she was more sophisticated than you could be in Middletown, living in California. So I tell you about the Salvins because some of you may run into the name Salvin in Connecticut. There are many of them. From the next brother, who was Herschel, and he never changed his name. His name was Slutsky. He is also in the picture, and he died in the early 40s. So my great-grandmother, who was, of course, older than these three half-brothers, she outlived them all. And Hyman, Herschel Slutsky, I know he had a daughter who worked in the store. She's in a picture with Minnie when they worked in the women's department. So, but all those people are really lost now. They've dispersed and there's no way to be in touch, I imagine. Although I understand that my Uncle Nettie, probably 20 years ago, he looked up Victor Salvin or Victor Slutsky, who was the son of Herschel and lived in North Carolina, and he planned on visiting him on his way to Florida. Okay, that's for the Salvins. I also want to go back to my Uncle Morris Shapiro's death, which we talked about last time. I thought of the name of the town where he lived and had his store. It was Guilford. And after his death at 27 in 1929, his wife, Hattie Kuttner, and his two little boys, I think Jay was only 6 weeks old at his death, she sold the store and went to New York. She was also, she had quite a bit of insurance from Morris. He was young, but he had life insurance. So she went to New York to start her life over again. And she met a man also named Murray or Morris Lewis. And they've got married, I suppose, around 1932, 33, something like that, and lived in Brooklyn. But in order for her to, have her new husband adjust to the idea of having two boys, she sent Burton back to Middletown when he was about 6 or 7, or maybe 8, to live with his grandparents, Kuttner, and go to school in Middletown. And she took care of Jay. He was the baby. Nobody ever knew this until the reconciliation. And he became very close to my aunts, particularly Muriel and Estelle. And he told Muriel that he knew a lot of their friends, their social friends in Middletown, because he went to school with them. Boys' names that came up, and it was really such a big surprise to the family. And when he stayed with, I suppose, 1 or at least 1 year, he stayed with the Kuttners. His grandfather used to walk him down Main Street. They would go past the Shapiro store, and he would say to him, that is your grandfather's store, now your uncle's store. But they never went in. That's how, deep that rupture was. It wasn't until 1946 when Burton was getting married and Hattie invited all the Shapiros to the wedding. And it was like, I guess, such a surprise. Sophie Shapiro, married to Jack, said to me one day, we didn't even know who it was. They didn't recognize the name Lewis. And they would just, they had to search it out to find out whose wedding it was. But a result of that coming together at the wedding, particularly Jack and Sophie became very good friends of Hattie and her husband, Murray. And 2 years later, when I had my bar mitzvah, Jack and Sophie came up from New York, and they brought along Hattie and Murray. They hadn't been invited, but they stopped at the house for the reception. We had a reception all day long, open house. And that was the first time that any of us met Hattie. She was a big woman at that time. And when she was leaving, we had a big stairway, and halfway up was a landing. And my great grandmother was on the landing, and she said goodbye. She just sort of bow, Hattie did, because she was big, and so she said goodbye, Shviga. And I never heard that word. And I said, gee, what is a Shviga? I remember running up the stairs to find my mother. What is a Shviga? She called Baba a Shviga. So my mother said, that means there again, mother-in-law in Yiddish. So you had a special word for that. Then Hattie drew very close to the family. She came to all the events until her death, actually. And as you know, her sons, particularly Burton, came back to the bosom of the family. So it's too bad they lost all those years. Okay, the other thing I wanted to bring up, we had cousins in Middletown named Kirkin and Rubel. And I'm hoping, I never knew exactly the relationship. I knew they were on Bubba's side, my great grandmother's side of the family. But the Kirkins were very close to the family. And the Rubels were Morris and Rose Rubel, not the Rubels who had the department store. They were German Jews. But Morris and Rose Rubel were cousins and brother and sister. And they married a brother and sister, Edith and Phil Shapiro, no relation to the Shapiros, ironically. Okay, I think I'm all set now. I've corrected everything. Do you want to join us now with some memories?
Mom, do you remember Joel's bar mitzvah?
Do I?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
I bet you remember what you wore.
I do. Wouldn't have missed it for anything.
Back up just a little bit. Scoot your chair back. Scoot your chair. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
But you gotta move over to your left. The other, yeah.
Okay.
Did she change her clothes? I don't know. I guess it's cold.
Hi, sweetness. Okay, well, to get on to my story, with Joel not interrupting to give all the names correctly, I will just say that I was always the flower girl to all those aunts and cousins. And every time there was a wedding, somebody had to make another dress or another slip or skirt for me. So I had all of these clothes. I think Jean Ann was the last bride. So there were several prior to that. And so that was always fun to go to and get dressed up. And yes, we did have the weddings in the backyard. They had a beautiful, beautiful yard, Grandma and Grandpa.
I hope you get some relief.
The other thing that I can think of is that we were living in Boston, and we would go to my grandparents in Connecticut for certain holidays. And it was always very exciting because we had a long drive and we stayed probably a whole weekend, and it was really nice. And we got to be with our cousins and aunts and uncles. And I had the distinct pleasure of going to my grandfather, Grandpa Harry, always had us come to the store. So my mother would drive me over to the store and he would say, pick out clothes, pick out what you need. And so my mother said, no. She's no, go upstairs. That's the children's department. And so I would go up there and I would get, I don't know what I got, maybe blouses and skirts. And then in the basement, the lower level, that was the shoe department. And I would always go in, and Uncle Frank was in charge of the bottom level, which was the shoe department. And I would come back to Boston with armful of clothes and bag full of shoes. And I was like in heaven. I don't know, any of my friends had this kind of, here's a department store, go take whatever you want. But my grandfather was so generous, and I can hear my mother saying right now, no, Pa, I have to pay you. You can't do anything. Go. So, and I just walked off with all of the clothes and everything. So that was some good memories back then and there. And I'm trying to think of something else. I can't think of anything right now. Well, of course, the best memories I have is that when Manny died and we would come to Middletown, I sort of had the girls, Laurie and Debbie, as my little girls. And then came along Donna and Lisa, but that was much later. But I was the babysitter for them. So there were times when somebody had to go someplace or there was a function. And I got to be at Muriel's house or Stell's house, play with the girls, and we had so much fun. It was just absolute fun. And I felt I was on a cruise ship, somewhere like that. And the sweetest memory I have of my Uncle Frank is that his job in Middletown all the time was to go on Sunday morning to the delicatessen. And he would go there and buy the breads and the cakes and the cookies for the house, my Grandma Rose's house. And he would always, when I was there, say, come on, you're the big girl, come pick out the stuff that we wanted. So I would have this delicatessen to myself because most of the food was even foreign to me. I didn't even know what he was saying, but it was just that exciting times. I also took the kids to a place to go swimming. Stell would drive us there, and we would be at a little pond that was there. And it was just like a little town, aside from the world that they lived in, that I got to play in every so often. My aunts, my uncles were so generous to me. There was so much love they gave that was the magic. So for my cousins who are alive to know it, what was carried on from your parents all went into my heart. It was just beautiful, beautiful times for me. And now, I think that's enough. Hello, Poopsie. Are you talking?
Hi.
Come on, talk to me.
So you said you remember what you wore to Joel's bar mitzvah. You didn't mention it.
Oh, I'm sure it was a dress, and I had new shoes. I probably had the stuff from Grandpa's store. So.
Oh, so you don't really remember. But I thought you remembered like a lot of particulars.
No. Well, I was a bridesmaid and a flower girl so many times that I would pass on those clothes. They would change them. They would put a blue ribbon here or lengthen the length or shorten it. But I could open up my closet. I must have had 8 party dresses. I was either the oldest or the youngest in the family rung. But for the Shapiro family, I was the oldest girl. Right? Right, Olivia? Where'd you go today? You can shut it off, I think. Are you coming back, Joel, for anything more? He's set for today. Bye, Olivia. We'll see you next week. Okay?
Okay, let me stop the recording. Hang on.